Police Council confirms Kayode Egbetokun as Substantive Inspector General of Police.
Very qualified, very honest, very transparent, and very hardworking. So we supported Mr. President's proposal.
President Bola Tinubu receives new envoys to Nigeria from Angola and Belgium.
Senate passes for second reading 2023 Supplementary Appropriation Bill of 2.1 trillion naira.
To the Committee on Appropriation and in view of the urgency to report back as soon as practicable.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall take a look at politics of impeachment.
Ordinarily, there is a laid-down procedure for the impeachment of any elected government official, but the Nigerian political landscape is driven by intrigues and political
rascality, of course, emanating from internal party conflicts, Demola, and such conflicts are usually attributed to, rifts between political godfathers, governors, deputies, and of course members of the legislature, in the two arms of government.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. A aggrieved party in such internal conflicts will then seek for the impeachment of such elected political officers. Impeachment is a very fundamental part of any democratic process, and the 1999 Constitution, as amended, aptly provided for procedures and processes that must be adhered to strictly for such impeachment procedure to be successful. Claire.
Yes, Demola, and in actual fact, the process of impeachment has been made by the framers to be simple, well, not so simple, but stringent, I should say, straightforward, as provided in the Constitution. But that has not been the case, as observed in various states across the country since, the political dispensation.
Yeah, I agree with you. There have been cases of abuse of impeachment procedures. On the one hand, an impeachment based on flimsy and mischievous reasons. The removal of Rashidi Ladoja as governor of Oyo State was a perfect example. While the law required 20 legislators to carry out the impeachment, 18 lawmakers met over the recommendations of a panel of inquiry and impeached the governor. The December 7, 2006 reinstatement of Ladoja by the Supreme Court reaffirmed the general notion that he was impeached through hooliganism and political rascality.
Indeed. Also, let's remind you of the case of Joshua Darie, the then governor of Plateau State, who was also impeached, but this time November 13, 2006, in a manner bookmakers say depicted disregard for the rule of law and indeed abuse. Now, a 5-man House of Assembly was said to have carried out that impeachment, and it was after a series of appeals. Fortunately, the governor was reinstated as governor in May before the end of his tenure. Also, again, Demola, in 2006, we remember the case of Governor Ayo Fayose and his deputy, Senator Biodun Olujimi, of course, who were removed from office. And, federal government subsequently declared a state of emergency in the wake of that, in appointing Brigadier General Adetunji Oluni as sole administrator. I'm sure you remember.
Yes, I do remember. And Claire, don't forget that Peter Obi of Anambra State also was impeached by the State House of Assembly, but was also reinstated by the court. So, Claire, the Nigerian political system has been rife with impeachment across party line. The latest incidents of impeachment scare were in Edo, Ondo, and now Rivers State.
And of course, the Rivers is the very much the latest, and conversations are still going on in that state as we speak. We heard there were pockets of protest, yesterday, but fortunately, it was quickly knocked by policemen. No, as I said, there have been conversations around impeachment offences committed by different political or elected officers, and that continued to dominate our political space and of course the democratic process. So the latest event in Rivers and other states really is the prompt for our conversation today. So what should we know about impeachment process, and how has this series or gale of impeachment impacted on our democracy and the democratic process in Nigeria? So that will be our focus for today on Good Morning Nigeria. I am Claire Adilabu Abdulrazak, and I welcome you to another interesting edition of the program on the network service.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Actually, that protest in Rivers State was actually 2 days ago. And I am Ademola Adeoye. I join my colleague Claire in welcoming you to the program. The third edition for the week. We are reaching you live from our studios here in the nation's capital, Abuja. In the course of the program, we shall take highlights of the morning news, some business news, and the newspaper segment. For now, let's get the morning highlights with Comfort Amodo. Hello, Comfort. Good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Ademola and Claire. Good morning, Nigerians. Here are the news highlights. President Bola Tinubu has intervened in the political crisis constituting security issue in Rivers State. This was during the Maiden Police Council meeting chaired by the President at the State House. Briefing State House correspondents. After the meeting, Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi revealed that the President showed concern over how the issue was degenerating. Also at the meeting, the Police Council confirmed Kayode Egbetokun as the substantive Inspector General of the Police.
I found him to be very qualified, very honest, very transparent, and very hardworking. So we supported Mr. President's proposal, and we said that he should be confirmed as substantive Inspector General of Police.
Confirming him now will give him the necessary, confidence.
And the use of technology and strategic communications are to be strengthened for effective policing in Nigeria. These, among other issues, were deliberated at the ongoing Strategic Police Conference in Owerri, Imo State.
As police officers, the trend is changing. Nobody is not most countries of the world are not talking about the analog way of policing. Most countries of the world are not talking about using technology to fight crime.
In other news, President Bola Tinubu received new ambassadors to Nigeria. The new envoys presented letters of credence signifying the withdrawal of their predecessors, respectively. First was Jose Zou from Angola, followed by the new ambassador from Belgium, Peter Legnet, and President Bola Tinubu also received letters from Savin, who will now represent Norway in Nigeria, as well as Albert Kassler as the new ambassador from Republic of Venezuela to Nigeria.
We will continue to work with these countries towards achieving our objectives.
The First Lady of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, has urged women in Imo State to vote for Governor Hope Uzodinma in November 11 off-cycle governorship election in the state. She made the appeal at a one-day women campaign rally in support of the re-election of Governor Uzodinma that will hold in Owerri.
This is the move of God. And let me tell you, like my husband promised, that the East will be the industrial hub of Nigeria. I want all of you to go on and vote en masse.
Senate passes for second reading a supplementary appropriation bill of 2.1 trillion naira for 2023 to address some critical areas of need. 18 billion is for statutory transfer, 992.8 billion for recurrent, while 1.1 trillion is development fund. The chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Service, Zach Adedeji, was also screened and confirmed as requested by President Bola Tinubu.
Made to address the short-term and the immediate and pressing issues. It is something that we need to support so that the government will be put in the best place.
This bill is now referred to the Committee on Appropriation, and in view of the urgency to report back as soon as practicable.
President Bola Tinubu has submitted the 2024 to 2026 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper to the House of Representatives for consideration and approval, preparatory to the submission of the 2024 budget proposals. A supplementary appropriation bill 2023 of 2.17 trillion naira also submitted by the executive scaled second reading at the House.
Including the wage award for public servants and the enhanced cash transfer program.
That's the news for now. After this break, Claire and Demola will take you through the rest of the program. Good morning.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service, and time to check on business news. And for that, we join Tokwe Alabi.
The federal government says Nigeria's power sector privatization had failed to meet its objectives as the national grid was serving only about 15% of the country's electricity demand, with over 19 million Nigerians lacking access to electricity despite being privatized 10 years ago. The president, through the Special Advisor on Energy and Infrastructure, Office of the Vice President, Sadiq Wanka, says preliminary analysis showed that the discos were currently undercapitalized to close to 2 trillion naira, adding that Nigeria's power tariffs should be rebased. This deficit, experts say, has left households and factories relying on expensive self-generation, which supplies 40% of the country's demand.
You now look at the issue of privatization of the power sector. The distribution companies, what is their investment? Apart from the payment for power that is generated by the generation companies. In infrastructure, how much has the distribution companies invested? Even meter, they couldn't provide meter. In most communities in Nigeria today, the consumers and community groups and individuals bought their transformer, bought wire, bought pole, paid for energizing. The regulator looks away and the distribution company does what they like.
In the meantime, chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele, has assured Nigerians that the ongoing plan by the federal government to introduce new foreign exchange rules will reflect the true value of the naira. He also said the plan, which would include a crackdown on illicit currency trading, would result in naira closing its gap.
As a country, if we are giving away 1 naira, we need to be able to convince ourselves that the benefits we are getting is more than 1 naira. Otherwise, that is no longer an incentive.
The government sees a fair price from the dollar at 650 to 750, as it will set transparent rules for the operation of the official market after the clearing of a backlog of dollar demand estimated at about $6.7 billion. With business news, I am Tokwe Alabi.
Many thanks, Tokwe, for that business package. Next is the newspaper review.
They has started. Chooks, good morning.
How are you?
You have
Good
started.
morning. What did I start?
Chooks the boy.
The cameras found me so gentle, calm, calculating.
Indeed.
You know,
Indeed.
water drinking. I don't drink alcohol, come to think of it. If I drink alcohol, in addition to this natural whatever,
I wonder
what will happen, Debola?
I can't tell.
He go waka come up for studio.
I don't know.
Anyway,
Good morning, Debola. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm okay. Claire, how are you too?
Yes, so.
Good morning.
Comme ci, comme ça.
Comme ci, comme ça. C'est la vie. One day at a time.
Tu parles français?
Non, je parle français, mais pas beaucoup. Pas beaucoup, mais je parle français. Tu parles français aussi?
Je parle français un peu.
Un peu?
Yeah.
Tout le monde parle français un peu.
Okay,
can we go to English? Can we speak our
Demo,
English?
I like that.
Speak our English. I beg.
All right, okay. Let me quickly start off with the New Telegraph newspaper. And it's leading with the story on the front page. Senate set to probe printing of new Naira notes by NSPMC. And it comes with a rider. Tinubu requests Senate's approval for 2.17 trillion Naira supplementary budget as it scales through Rep's second reading. President forwards MTEF to NAS ahead of 2024 budget, and Senate confirms Adedeji as FIRS chair. And there are other stories there. Just quickly, a look at the ones trending below the nameplate. Police Council confirms Egbatokun as IGP. Tinubu to go after criminal adventurers in mining sector. It's right there. You can read it up on pages 4 and 6. An appeal court declares saver for Bayelsa governorship election. Firms Natasha Akpoti, of course, as Kogi Central Senator. That story can be found on pages 2 and 6. And Q3 2023, all right, that's on business news. And let's quickly go down the foot of the paper. Election petition, PDP governors accuse judiciary of double standard. Nigerian jurisprudence now laughing stock. It's right there on page 6. And Rivers, Tinubu wades into Fubara and Wike field. Appeals to return to the state, Bauchi governor, and INEC urges Wike to concentrate on INC, I beg your pardon. INC, not INEC. INEC has no business here. INC, that urges Wike to concentrate on FCT job. And, this one is on the health grounds, and I think it's quite beneficial. Chukudi and Demola here. He says, this is according to a study. Keeping phones in men's pocket may damage sperm. Details of that on page 6. Keeping phones in men's pocket may damage sperm. And it's not just men's pocket. Even some women also stock their phones in their inner, breastwear, which is, we were told, it's also very dangerous and, of course, can bring about some cancerous conditions.
Hand phone.
Well, the study.
That's why it's called.
Yes, some people do that. Some people do. Some people, hide
what
away.
we fail to realize is, see, the level of information an individual has does a lot to the person's life in little ways. It's little things that matter in life.
Where's your phone now? In your pocket?
I think it's in the car in my pocket. There are little, though minimal levels of radiation. Even the mast close to your house, you have minimal levels of radiation. But scientists say that it is not one that can really, But when the phone is too close, let me tell you, that when the phones came out, that Motorola everybody had. Yes. I had it. I'm a 330 MTN person. To show you, I'm a first liner. Yes. These things happen. So the phone rang close to my head. I put it on vibration. Claire, I woke up with a terrible headache. And it was after 1 hour, I got to know it was the phone that actually gave me that headache.
Just hold it. Let's quickly.
So people have to be careful.
Just hold it. Just hold it. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that quickly. Daily Sun is reporting end of road for wanted deadly bandit amid kidnapping of 25. And the rider, troops record breakthrough in Kebbi and Saru in Kaduna. And Naira gained strength against dollar as CBN denies plans to redenominate currency. Naira gained strength against dollar. That's good news. That's, I think, for the second or third day running.
Yeah.
So we keep our fingers crossed and hope high that the Naira, of course...
And I've not heard yet that the
will,
$10 billion the coordinating minister of the economy mentioned has started coming in. If it does come in, that means that the Naira is going to do better. Yes.
So, all right. Appeal court affirms Natasha winner of Kogi Central senatorial seat. And Tinubu upholds ex-Taraba Speaker's election. Breach of agreement. Amaju Pinnick sues Davido, demands 2.3 billion naira public apology. That's on sports. Tinubu intervenes Wike for Barra clash. Of course, the duo met at police council meeting. PDP governors charge all actors in Rivers crisis to sheath swords and let reason prevail. That's Dr. Peter's side. Bayelsa governorship election, court reverses Savers disqualification as APC candidate. But president sets up committee on police reform. And of course, NBA, that's the story trending at the bottom of the paper. NBA pledges to uphold Nwabueze and witches' legacies. Details of that on page 28. Demola.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I have the leadership newspaper with me, and below the nameplate, immediately below the nameplate, I have the briefing trending. Naira Marley, Sam Larry challenged continued detention. FEC approves 2.1 trillion supplementary budget. History today. Both stories can be gotten on page 2. New CBN Forex policy threatens 12 trillion poultry industries operators. A story is on page 7. Apoti wins appeal as court clears silver in Bayelsa race. The story can also be gotten on page 7. Impeachment saga uneasy calm in Rivers as Tinubu intervenes. The 150 protesters arrested. Fubara denies sacking council chairman. PDP urges calm. That story is on page 4. Egbetokun Adedeji confirmed as police revenue agency chiefs. Page 4. Federal government labor meeting to hold next week. The story is on page 16. War on Gaza. Oil prices may hit $157 per barrel. World Bank. The story is on page 28. Kwakwanso Ali Alkali orders dump NNPP for APC. The story is on page 6. And the photo on the front line is President Bola Tinubu middle with state governors after the National Police Council meeting at the presidential villa in Abuja yesterday. Chooks, over to you.
Yes, quickly, a point of grammar. I heard you say that the pugilists in River State have been urged to sheathe swords.
Yeah.
You don't pluralize an English idiom. They should sheathe the sword. Our children have to write their exams and pass the English at UTME. So we have to be very careful. You can't say he's a fly that got in our drinks. You say he's a fly that got in our drink. It becomes a collective, that's it. It's very important, please. Okay, we take it as that. Zenith Bank is recording triple-digit 114% growth in Q1 of 2023. And I say we are usually happy when banks or maybe any other business announce, profits, given that the economy is virtually in dire straits. But in the case of banks, you also, please, we're not saying this strictly about Zenith. Zenith just provided a platform for this thought coming from me. What is the source of banks' profits, essentially? You want to ask. Is it from some of what some of us see as many fees, those fees that you see on your cell phone, the 26 naira here, this amount of money here. At the end of the day, you're asking whether banks are actually injecting enough money into manufacturing, which at the end of the day is going to give us more employment, is going to give us more productivity and all that. Where loans are even given, what is the tenor? How long do those loans last? Do they last long enough for the investor to actually work on in healthy territory? Congrats to Zenith, but banks should do more to raise manufacturing prospects. That's what I have on that. Then you mentioned that the feud in the Gaza Strip, if it escalates, could actually take oil crude prices to 157.
Yeah, pardon.
And maybe you see, people think that when it's another man's matter, it doesn't really concern us. But I can tell you that even if crude moves to 157, in a cyclical display of global penury, you're going to find out that we are not really going to gain a lot, because first of all, we are importing finished products. That's a refined products. So we won't gain maximally from it.
Exactly. I was going to say that because
Yes.
At the moment I don't know what our production capacity is. The last time Demola, it was less than 1.8.
It's still
production
between
capacity.
1.7 and 1.8. It's still in that territory.
Yes.
It's never really steady.
Yes, it never, and we're also hoping that the refineries that were promised, the Dangote refineries, I don't know what the state of those refineries now, that's from the private end, and then the turnaround that we're expecting from the other four major refineries.
Is it last quarter of 2024? I read 2 days ago that the Kaduna one is going to, get back on stream and start churning
in 2024.
2024. It's 2024,
okay.
really.
We also should begin to look at the impact of that on the pump price of fuel, because if the price, shoots up, if global price of crude shoots up, it's again because the pump price of fuel now is being regulated by market forces.
Yes.
Subsidy is gone.
Exactly, Claire. Necessity is the mother of invention. What interests me in all of this is how much is CNG going to come in, compressed natural gas going to come in to tell the petroleum motor spirit, PMC, that's the one we call petrol, that you are not lord of the manor. We too can power cars, power generators and all that. When we increase our options, our lives really become better. Very important. So the CNG
Demola, I want to
venture.
say something. I agree.
The CNG venture, I think, is something.
It's laudable.
Very laudable.
Laudable, and I know that
very
some
laudable.
state government have already keyed into it, like Ogun State government.
Oh yes.
I think it was yesterday that they launched their own first batch of vehicles, and they said that the governor promised that the second batch will come in maybe in the next 2 weeks. I think that will go a long way to ease, the challenges that will be faced by the populace.
Yes.
But even now, small, businesses, MSMEs, are also beginning to convert their, machines and other tools.
Exactly.
To gas powered. They no longer use the popular pass my neighbor. The generators have been powered by
gas.
Gas,
Some of the generators have been converted already.
Yes.
By local effort. Ingenuity.
Exactly.
Is on these shores. Nigerian people are gifted. I don't know why we're still in the sad past.
Exactly. But I think much needs to be done in terms of awareness creation, and empowerment, sort of,
And it's not just a one-off awareness; it has to be sustainable awareness.
Exactly.
Because when you say it once, and people hear it and they don't hear it again, they tend to forget, and that is probably the problem that we have in this country.
So planning and the amount of investment would matter in such a situation for sustainability.
Thank you very much, Chooks.
Thank you,
that's all we can have on the newspaper review for this morning. Stay with us. We'll take a break now. Yeah, welcome back. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. And to set the stage for our discussion on politics of impeachment, let's take this backgrounder report by correspondent Joseph Austin.
Just about 5 months after the 2023 general elections, Rivers State is already burning. The State House of Assembly complex raised as attempts to impeach the state governor by a faction of the State House of Assembly stir an uneasy calm in Port Harcourt. Reasons for the disagreement not certain, but feelers around indicates internal party disagreement. Since the Fourth Republic, 1999 till date, cases of impeachment have flooded Nigeria's democracy. For instance, between 2003 to 2007, described as period of impeachment gala, 5 governors were affected. Former Governor of Bayelsa State, Dapere Alemesia in 2005, Rashidi Ladoja of Oyo State follows suit, then Joshua Dare of Plateau State and Governor Ayodele Fayose of Ekiti State, all in 2006. Another was the Anambra State Governor Peter Obi, same 2006, just after 7 months in office. Several other deputy governors were also affected. Another example was after the 2011 election. Several impeachment cases were recorded in Taraba, Kogi, and Bayelsa states in 2012. For instance, the Taraba State House of Assembly removed the Deputy Governor Sani Abubakar Danladi. In Kogi State, the House of Assembly impeached the Speaker Abdullahi Bello and 10 other principal officers in the chambers. Similarly, the Speaker of Bayelsa State House of Assembly, Friday Benson, also had a knock of impeachment 3 months after he assumed office. Most of the impeachments were attributed to maladministration and financial recklessness on the part of those affected, but in most cases, political analysts believed there were political undertones. For them, impeachment has become a political weapon used by political parties, the executive, or the legislature against perceived opponents. Most times the processes are faulted, leading to courts reinstating those impeached. An example is that of Peter Obi, who was eventually returned to office by the judiciary, who declared the processes of the impeachment as unconstitutional. Same with the reinstatement of Ladoja and Dare by the Supreme Court, questioning the impeachment processes. From what has transpired since 1999, many have continued to question the true motive of some of these impeachments and what constitutes the right procedures of impeachment at all levels and tiers of government. Good Morning Nigeria today will engage guests on the politics of impeachment in Nigeria and its impact on the nation's democracy.
That was background reports put together by correspondent Joseph Oteng. And Joseph, thank you very much. We have a number of guests. As soon as they come in, we'll introduce them. But let me quickly welcome Professor Emmanuel Remi Ayede, who is a professor of political institutions, governance and public policy, Department of Political Science, University of Ibadan. Well, he's joining us now all the way from Nairobi in Kenya via Zoom. Professor Ayede, thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure to join you this morning.
Thank you, Professor, for joining us. Our topic for today is politics of impeachment. And you know that impeachment is part of checks and balances in a democracy. But the person in the eye of the storm first has to be guilty for impeachable offenses. Can we take a look at some of these offenses? What are some of these offenses?
Well, I think the Constitution is not very elaborate in terms of what those offenses are, but the word used by the Constitution is gross misconduct, which means that it is left for the National Assembly or the House of Assembly, as the case may be, to determine what amounts to gross misconduct. And that's why if you observe, you'll find that the offenses that have been levied against governors that were impeached vary very widely, from accusations of corruption to accusations of irresponsible behavior in office, and similar accusations that it will really take quite a number of time for those accusations to be proven in terms of appropriate documentation and so on and so forth. But what we have is that once the allegations have been made, the next thing you find is that there's a rush, to move for the motion of impeachment. And normally, the process is supposed to be very elaborate in terms of the steps to be taken. But you find that in most cases, they just railroad their way through the process, which has led in many circumstances the courts to overturn such impeachment. So I think the idea of gross misconduct is supposed to be something very serious that requires elaborate establishment of the cases of misconduct. But what you have a list of offenses that are reeled out against the governors. Some of them may be involved in cases of misappropriation, corruption, and all that, and so forth. But the interesting part is really that the initial cases of misconduct was against governors, but now you find that a lot of what has happened in the recent two regimes is that they are usually used against deputy governors. And in those cases, the process has been very swift, that leave much to be desired in terms of transparency and in terms of following due process. So gross misconduct is determined by the legislature.
All right, Professor Ayede, we'll still stay with you, but I'd like to start with, why the process appears to, always be an embattled process. Ordinarily, the procedure, is well, laid out, enshrined in the 1999 Constitution as amended. It ought to be, a straightforward process. And, unfortunately, again, a preponderance of it, has been with at the second tier of government, like you rightly said, and that's among governors and deputy governors. Rarely have we seen, the president or the vice president impeached, but we've seen more of that happening at the second tier of government. So my question to you will be, just as a background, why does it appear that impeachment process is always an embattled one and violent too?
Yeah, I think it's actually part of the politicking that goes on. If you look very closely, you'll find that the process of impeachment usually commence when there's a serious disagreement, either between the governor and the president, because I think this is very important in the earlier cases of impeachment. And then the other one is when the deputy governor has a problem with the governor. And then the last one, which we are seeing unfolding in Rivers State, is usually when the godfather has a problem with the sitting governor and he wants to show the governor that he's still in charge of the political machinery in the state. So when you see these impeachment processes embedded in political disagreement between powerful political forces, whether at the state or federal national level or within the state, you'll find this impeachment move going on. That's why in some cases, such deputy governors have resigned rather than, match their godfathers violent for violence. But what we are seeing in the case of Rivers State is the ability, the effort, by both the orchestrator of the impeachment process and the sitting governor trying to show their their might. One, in ensuring that the impeachment process goes on, and secondly, on the other hand, in ensuring that the impeachment process does not happen. So that's what is unfolding in that process. So it's not really as if there is systematic establishment of cases or misconduct against the governor that have, for instance, has been in the media, and there's pressure from the people on the national or the State House of Assembly to take action. Rather, before you even hear anything about the misconduct of the governor in the media, you are likely to see the impeachment process already commencing. In other words, it is in fact the National Assembly that, first of all, threw up the idea that the governor has been involved in some kind of misconduct or the other, rather than the National Assembly being forced to come in as a result of an obvious infringement of law or breach of the Constitution. You have a situation where people begin to learn about a breach, from the House of Assembly, and before that time, you will hear little or nothing in terms of the misdemeanor of the governor in the media. And one would have expected first for the offense to be in the public. There will be debate about the gravity of the offense. What should the National Assembly do, and so on and so forth. In fact, we would even expect a debate around whether it's a criminal offense that it can lead to the prosecution of the governor. So those fine debates around the behavior of the governor hardly happens before you start seeing the impeachment process. So it's as if the cart appears before the horse, and then the horse will now later overtake the cart in terms of the process. So it's usually very shady, and then you have this accusation and counter accusation, for which of course the public know very, very little. It's really an unfortunate situation, because often, because of this shady character of these accusations, you find that it becomes something that looks like an abuse of the process, which then is now confronted with another abuse of law, and then the whole thing explodes in political phases. And this one is particularly very, very terrible, because Rivers politics has always been very high in violence. Elections are even very difficult to conduct in many places. So naturally, you can see the very violent dimension that this has taken. Of course, in other places, there are cases of violence, but I don't think anyone has been as ferocious as this. But we are lucky. I think there's no report of cases or any member of the House being assaulted like we have in the case of Oyo State some time ago. So, but it's really because it's not there's something that is transparent, and the process is not followed to the letter, and there are undercurrents, political undercurrents between strong forces within the polity accounting for the violent nature of those processes.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayede, for that contribution there. We'll come back to you later, but let's take time to introduce two of our guests that are joining us via Zoom from Kaduna Center. We have Mr. Mark Jacob, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Kaduna State. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, Mr. Mark Jacob.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And also with him there is Professor Muhammad Kabil Isa, Professor of Governance, Department of Local Government and Development Studies, Faculty of Administration, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, Kaduna State. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Nigeria. It's a pleasure to be on the panel again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let me start with Professor. If you listen to Professor Ayede there, he said the process for impeachment is supposed to be done in the open. And you notice that most times this impeachment process is normally done in the dark, clandestinely, Claire. Before you wake up, you just hear the news that someone has been impeached. What exactly is supposed to be the process? Is it supposed to be done, in the dark? Professor?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the panel again. The real issue and the problem is that, we, in 1999, imbibed a democratic value and a democratic process, which is supposed to come with some political culture and some democratic culture. And so we built a constitution. Now that constitution is supposed to come with some values, some ethos, some civic culture. The combination of these values is what we call civic culture in politics. Now, unfortunately, over time, because of severe existentialism of Nigeria under military rule, our politicians still imbibe certain culture which are akin to, hierarchical order and behavior that tend towards, tyranny. And democracy is either leading to liberty, freedom, fraternity, and equality, or it's leading to tyranny, dictatorship. And so what we have is that we have imbibed a system of democracy with a constitution which is supposed to lead to certain individual and corporate practice of democracy, which empowers people to voice, to open up, and give upon good governance, development, and advancement of humanity. Unfortunately, we have a system where the constitution empowers people to deliver on their purpose and the objective of society. However, people misconstrue the practices in the constitution, and it is these practices that creates the processes that we have today. And so you have our constitution, which gives too much power to the executive, and the executive misapply these executive powers instead of using the powers to create a practice and a process that's institutionalized and empowers the institutions. We have individuals more powerful than the institution. And this is what we have in theory and in practice. Because in 2016, I was part of a team of Chatham House where we went through some region of the country, and we discovered that the executive of these states tend to have powers. We have seen a state house of assembly where a budget within 24 hours is passed. So you know that the practice of politics, the practice of democracy in that process had been abused. And so an impunity in democracy kills the system. And so coming back to the point of the issue of impeachment, it is part of the wider picture of impunity in our democratic practice and values, which we have adopted over the years. And we are not walking the rope and the tight order of democracy. We have in principle democracy, we have a constitution, but people interpret the constitution to suit their personal interests, their corporate interests as politicians. And so you will not be surprised to see that impeachment, which is supposed to be a tedious process that guarantees the right and gives free, fair hearing to the persons and individual concerned, is done in a shady manner, in a process that is lacking in due process. So and that tells you that, of course, there is an ulterior motive and there is a purpose for pursuing that particular purpose. Impeachment is a very serious process. The architects of the Constitution did not just put impeachment there for the purpose of just impeachment. It is there to first serve as a sanction. If you know that when you abuse the law, when you rape the law, these are the consequences. But it is not the consequences that happen. In other words, right from the time Governor Ngige was removed, and the mode in which it was removed, the architects or the political elites in Nigeria ought to have seriously looked at the Constitution again and question and interrogate the practice of the Constitution from interpretation, because practice comes from the mode of interpretation. And what we have is that irrespective of legal interpretation, Constitution, in fact, there are a lot of court interpretation, legal interpretation about what the Constitution says about impeachment. There are a lot of legal interpretation, but it does not dovetail into political practice, civic culture, of democracy in our country. And so in the end, what it shows is that we have politicians who have not imbibed the political culture, the democratic ethos of practicing the democracy we so seek to have in our country, as expressed in the general will of the people, which is the Constitution. So what in essence is saying is that our democracy needs to be revisited. Not the Constitution. We need to revisit our attitude, mindset, political mindset. We want to copy what Americans are doing. We want to copy what the Germans are doing. We want to copy what the French Republic is doing, what the Italians have done in the 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th century. Yet, we do not want to imbibe the ethos, the culture, and the civic attitude of politicians the world over. So we misconstrue, we misabuse. And that tells you the level of development, economic development that we have attained as a society. So not until we change our mindset, we do a cultural revolution, a change, a rejig, a reimaging, a reorganizing of our mode of thinking and mode of interpreting how we do things, we have a long way to go. There is a long haul to take in our democratic culture and democratic practice. And that's why things like what is obtainable in Rivers State, starting from what we experienced from Ngige to date, will continue, and the dimension and the scale of it will worsen, except we go back. It's not the problem of Constitution, it's the problem of people and the way they think and the practices. Much more so that we have experienced so much. We have, as an independent country, we have stayed more under authoritarian rule than democracy. So our democracy is still fledgling, is still upcoming and burdening. So we must build a culture, a practice. We must define what is Nigeria's political culture. What do we want to achieve with our democracy? Where does it lead us to? What do we want to achieve with democracy in Nigeria? Then we will be able to define what it is and implement those values for which we want to pursue as a democratic entity.
Professor Kabir Issa, thank you. You have raised quite a number of issues, and you know, just to say that after 24 years of democratic experience since 1999, successful one at that. Our democracy is maturing. I would use maturing, and indeed it is maturing. But let me bring in the Commissioner for Justice, Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Kaduna State, Mark Jacob, into our conversation. And I would like you to outline, we've said that the procedure for impeachment is very stringent. I'd like for you to outline for us you know, those procedures. We know that the legislature is empowered, you know, to conduct these procedures. And then I would also like for you to take along with it, despite the outer clause which prescribes that, you know, the decision of the adoption of any report on impeachment by the National Assembly is final. We've seen, you know, the law courts intervene and upturn, you know, certain impeachment, you know, processes that have been conducted, and we know so many, a number of governors have been beneficiaries of the court's impute. No, so should the law courts be active or passive, you know, in any impeachment process?
The truth is that, just like the professor said, we're in trouble as far as our democracy and our culture, our perception of powers is concerned. People are in offices donated to them by the Constitution, but they are not interested in obeying the Constitution. And that is why, yes, just like you said, you can see a process that is supposed to take 3 months can be concluded in 3 days. We have seen it in Nigeria. The governor of Plateau State, the former governor, Darie, we had members of the House of Assembly taken to Abuja and then brought back to Jos with police protection and moved with force into the House of Assembly, and then they impeached the governor. We have seen such crazy conduct with impunity and disrespect to the Constitution. And so just like he said, We have individuals that have become more powerful than the Constitution. We have individuals that have enjoyed the power donated to them by the Constitution, who are now bigger than the Constitution. And that is why, even in the case at hand, you can find a situation where the issues that warrant impeachment are only known to the members of the House of Assembly. Why is it that nobody knew of the so-called misconduct before the incident on Monday? Nobody has heard or seen the governor conduct himself in an unruly manner. Nobody is aware of any allegations against him. Then boom, there is an impeachment notice. And what is grave misconduct as defined by Section 188 of the Constitution? Gross misconduct is not a small offense. It's not an issue of quarreling or disagreeing with members of the House of Assembly or disagreeing with your boss, because today you have godfatherism in Nigerian politics. So a slight disagreement with one godfather somewhere, he gives instruction that some people a number of the members of the House of Assembly should come and impeach his godson. The thing playing out in Rivers State is so embarrassing because we have seen Rivers in the news for the wrong reasons. 2014, if you recall, Amechi was fighting for his life. And because of that, he shut down the judiciary, made sure that the courts could not operate because a notice also of his impeachment was supposed to be given. And then the state CJ was supposed to constitute a panel to investigate him. And hell was let loose. And we have seen drama from Rivers State over and over again, like I said, for the very wrong reasons. And it is terribly wrong. It has nothing to do with the welfare or well-being of the people of Rivers State, but it has everything to do with individual interests, individual ambitions, and what comes into their hands. And this is wrong. If Nigerian democracy is really maturing, we should be seeing less of this kind of behavior from our members, from our politicians. It's such an embarrassment that Nigeria will be bringing out these stories. I watched this incident in Rivers State. It was aired on a foreign television station. And Nigeria is becoming a reference point for the absurd. We keep doing things that just bring us down in the eye of the public, in the eye of the international community. And no wonder the king of Great Britain is in Kenya today. There is no mention of anybody coming to Nigeria because we have established ourselves as the capital of the absurd. And we keep doing these things without caring what anybody says. And that is not supposed to be the case. Nigeria must mature. Nigeria must move away from the absurd. And sorry, the courts cannot also fold their hands. The courts have a role to play in every aspect of our judiciary, of our democracy. Without the courts, there will be no democracy. Of course, there are wrong things that are happening here and there with the judiciary. Sometimes you don't get what you expect. But again, that is human existence. There's no perfect system anywhere in the world. So the judiciary cannot be excluded from handling these issues because just like I've said, the absurdity, the impunity that our politicians display because they have power donated to them by the Constitution needs to be checked. And truly, it is only the court that can check such impunity. Imagine a situation where the Constitution requires, for instance, under Section 188, that you cannot serve an impeachment notice by proxy. You must serve it personally on the person you want to impeach. But before you know it, you will hear that he was served. You will hear that within 3 days, a panel has already been constituted. But the strict provisions of the Constitution from Section 188 are very clear. You first of all serve him the notice, then he replies. If he replies, you now set up a panel to look at it, and then you send it to the CJ. That is after you have passed a resolution with two-thirds majority that has looked at the response to the impeachment notice and come to the conclusion that the process should continue. If you have two-thirds majority, you now send that back to the CJ to constitute the panel to investigate. But like I said, we are seeing where all these processes have been concluded within hours, and the person will be impeached, and nothing will happen. Now, unless there is a superior power, an arbiter in the person of the court that will call everybody to order, Nigeria will become, again, the center of absurdity, because people are ready to obey the Constitution in the reverse manner, in the absurd fashion, where you know the provisions, but you are directly saying you are not going to comply. But you have an agenda, and you hide under the power that is donated by that Constitution to trample upon the Constitution.
Mr. Jacob, again, there are those who say that the intervention normally of the judiciary, of the court, the law courts in the impeachment process is part of the gap, that needs to be addressed, because there's a finality clause, there's an outer clause, that's how the legal term for it, embedded also in those procedures that make the impeachment procedures very stringent.
The courts ought not to intervene if you follow the process properly. For instance, if you are supposed to serve the governor personally and you do not serve him, if you are supposed to wait for him to respond and you do not wait for him to respond, if you are supposed to set up a team within your system in the House of Assembly to examine his response, and then if you are supposed to have a two-thirds majority endorsing that the matter or the procedure should go further, if you do not follow those processes, you have lost the locus to say that the court should not intervene. At that stage, if you have not followed the process laid down by the Constitution, the court has ample power to intervene, to stop absurdity and stop impunity.
Mr. Mark Jacob, former Attorney General of Justice, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Kaduna State. Thank you for your contribution there. And also, we'd like to inform you that we are being joined in the studio right now by Mr. Yabagi Yusuf Sani, National Chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC. You are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Thank you for coming. So we are discussing the politics of impeachment in Nigeria. And we know that actually impeachment was actually introduced to check abuse of power. It is said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is why this impeachment clause is there in the Constitution, to check the autocratic, method of governance by the executive in particular. But you find out that in most cases, the procedures are not followed. There's so much, before you wake up, just like the Attorney General said, there's so many rascality going on. Let me put it that way, rascality. So how do we check this? How do we address all these rascality in the system?
Well, thank you for the question, because it's something that bothers us a lot, especially with the political parties. But again, it's not far-fetched, because if you have weak institutions in a democratic setting, this is what you see, because the laws are not obeyed. The intention of the laws themselves are abused, and you can take it from the issue of godfatherism. You also take it from the issue of monetization of the politics, the process itself. So these are the things that introduced what you call rascalism. So to me, it's the unfortunate, maybe the rough stages, the not so good, stages of development of democracy, because it is never intended to be like that. What was intended is that people should elect their choice, to govern them. It is not for a few to sit somewhere and say, no, this man is not good enough, when the people themselves that elected the person had not said so. So, yes, it was introduced, the impeachment clause was introduced in the Constitution because there are cases where the people may not be able to express themselves because it will require a kind of recall, as in the Constitution, and that's a very long process. But that is when it is obvious that the person you have elected is not, performing the duties, that is supposed to do in accordance with the law, and then the understanding of the people. It's like you see, the whole system. I started by saying that the institutions are weak, because they said when you have a fool in power, people who elected in are well represented, because but in this case, especially if you are looking at River State, what is happening today there, it's not what our laws contemplated. It wasn't supposed to be at the beck and call of few people or one individual to wake up and say, well, this man is not dancing to my tune, and therefore he should be removed. It's not an oligarchical system that we have. This is a democratic system where we are practicing, meaning that the people must be at the center of whatever we do. That's what democracy is all about. What do people think? And if you don't do that, then we are doing something else. So that's why I said, look at it from the beginning itself. How is the judiciary itself, performing? How are they doing their bidding? Are they meeting the yearnings of the people? I mean, if you listen to the recent things, coming from the judiciary itself, the valedictory speech of Datijo, it's been called retired. I read some statement from Agbakoba, who is the president, the former president of NBA, who says the judiciary is the most undemocratic institution. And what the learned, judge, the retired judge says about judiciary, it's so unbecoming. It's embarrassing, really, to some of us. And perhaps this is why we are not getting it right, because judiciaries are the cornerstone of democracy, especially if it's a constitutional democracy. Everything about it, has to be referred or operated in line with the dictate of the law. But here you are. Those that are supposed to dispense this justice, those that are supposed to be custodians of these laws, are themselves not, meeting the minimum requirement, as the case may be. I remember the learned judge, was saying that the judge was saying that they are even against the Constitution, the composition of the Supreme Court as we have it today. It's not in line with what the Constitution says. So, and then somebody outside says it's the most autocratic system that you can find. So it's a very serious problem that we have as a nation, which must be addressed. Because if we don't address that, what you see happening in terms of impeachment, because people believe you can procure all these things. So it doesn't matter. You talk about the judge, you talk about going to a Supreme Court or go to wherever. I can pay. It's a matter of how much am I ready to part with. Then I get justice. Unfortunately, that's where we are, and because now that it's been discussed, I'm sure we'll get it right, because other countries have gone through worse case scenario than Nigeria. So it's not a hopeless case at all, but it's a case that we must address, and address it squarely.
Yes, it's a case that we must address and address it squarely. And just like you said, that it's a weak institutions that we have right now. But let's go to Professor Ayede via Zoom in Kenya. Professor Ayede, if you listen to what the last contributor said about the issue of weak institutions, and we know that democracy is supposed to be separation of powers, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. But in this instance, we hardly find a clear-cut separation of power. And most times, before you even wake up, you find out that the Speaker of the House of Assembly has been removed, maybe because of it was out of favor, maybe from the executive. So how do we strengthen our institutions? How do we go about strengthening them?
institutions are strengthened by their custodians. For instance, we have the National Assembly, they have leadership, and they have members. Now, it is the responsibility of the members of that arm of government to protect the rights and powers of that institution, and to also refrain from abusing them, knowing fully well the consequences. I mean, take for instance the whole idea of impeachment. When you impeach a governor or a president, what you have done is that you have overturned the decision of the populace when they cast their vote for that particular candidate. Now, this is a very serious matter. But if the leadership of the National Assembly or the House of Assembly, as the case may be, does not recognize these grave consequences of impeachment, then we have serious problem. Because as we found out from the report of the committee that investigated the January 6th event in the US, it says institutions cannot defend themselves. There are people, human beings, or they are in a position to defend them, that will have to do so. So institutions cannot be strengthened if at every turn a former governor or a member of the National Assembly does not feel that sense of responsibility to know that there will be consequences if they abuse their powers and their offices. And that is actually the crux of the matter. And that's what the other professor was talking about when he was saying something has to do with political culture, something has to do with civic culture, that democracy has values that we have to protect and observe. Some of which, of course, is the respect for the rule of law, values of moderation rather than extreme behavior, recognition of your commitment to your society, your recognition of the fact that every action that you take as a leader has consequences that you must pay attention to. Otherwise, you can ruin your entire society. These are the values that make institutions strong. So if people don't respect those values and they think anything can go, then we do have weak institutions. Because as Robert Putnam would say, at the beginning of new politics, people mold institutions, but afterwards, institutions mold leadership. So we are at the stage where our democracy has just started in this republic since 1999. Those who have been in government are supposed to be those by their behavior who will consolidate those institutions. But what we have had is a series of abuse and disregard for those institutions. We then mean that the institutions as they are will remain weak until we begin to strengthen them by observing the rules, by respecting the rules of the game and upholding democratic values in all the things that we do. That's how institutions become. Because when we continue to do that, we create a culture of decency, a culture of respect for law, a culture of sense of responsibility for our fellow citizens. Now, once we don't build those cultural habits, then institutions will remain weak. And that is why in many countries where you find those in positions of power abusing those privileges and opportunities that they enjoy, you see those who are even worse off in terms of observing rules taken over by force. And so you find some society degenerating into anarchy. So I think our current political leadership carry the responsibility of strengthening those institutions by respecting them, by observing due process, and behaving in a manner that shows that they care about the consequences of the action, that they care about the values of democracy, that they care about the condition of our society. I mean, the voters who have put them in the office in the first place. That is the only way institutions can be strengthened. And we also have civil society. They have to come out when things are going wrong to stand up and defend the constitution and defend the tenets of democracy and call some of these people to order by public outcry. Now, if we keep quiet and the politicians are doing whatever they like and we sit in our rooms as if it doesn't matter, the consequences will bounce back to us as community. And that's why it's important for civil society organizations not to focus only on observing elections. They also have to do what we call social accountability. They have to hold.
All right, Professor Ayede, thank you for the points that you have raised about the need to strengthen institutions. And I would like to go to Academia Studio, and my question can also be taken up by both Mr. Mark Jacob and Professor Kabiru Isa. If you look at the the provisions of the procedures for impeachment. A fundamental aspect is the one that prescribes that impeachment procedure can be invoked if an executive is found guilty of gross misconduct of the functions of his office, or of course violation of the Constitution. My question is, might the concept of gross misconduct be bogus and misunderstood concept in jurisdiction, and therefore the rascality that we see whenever such a procedure is invoked, especially at the second arm of government, namely where you find serving of impeachment procedures by proxy, like you rightly said, and burning of public infrastructures?
Well, the situation we find ourselves in is very sad and pathetic. And like all the contributors have said, we are facing a situation where individuals are walking on the path of impunity without respect at all. And so I have handled cases that have to do with misconduct, the definition of misconduct, the definition of gross misconduct. There are civil servants or public servants that have been laid off or removed from office because of misconduct. If you go to court, there are definitions of what a misconduct is. And you can't wake up in the morning and say that because you had a discussion or a disagreement with the governor at a party, and then you call it gross misconduct. Or the sharing formula or some things didn't work out as you want. Then you come and hide under grave misconduct and begin to impeach. Now, there is a definition of what gross misconduct is. Of course, that provision also left it open that it is in the opinion of the House of Assembly. These are the issues that also need to be taken care of, maybe by the draftsmen. Because when we know the exact or the definition of what is gross, and then you come and leave it at the discretion of the House of Assembly, you have watered down the entire system or definition. So it's a problem of draftsmanship. However, nobody should toy with the votes that were donated by the population, the Nigerian citizen, in electing a governor. It's not a small thing to elect a governor. And so when the legislature is handling this matter, just like Yagbayi said, there must be something restraining you from going into absurdity. And that is the vote, the popular vote of the people. You don't toy with that. You don't take it as yours. You don't treat it the way you treat a personal issue. You treat it as public wealth. It's public property you are toying with. And so the Nigerian legislature, in all the houses of assembly, must be careful when interpreting or invoking the powers donated under Section 188. It is not something to be trivialized. I agree that there are problems with the judiciary, but it's the same thing in every segment of our country. And it is, first of all, human beings, individuals, that make these institutions not to work. Individuals that have, like I said, been donated power by the Constitution to operate in these institutions, make them ineffective, make the institutions to look weak, make the institutions to be ineffectual because of personal agenda and personal interests. And this, like the professors have said, we must attempt and work on changing. But who will change it? The politicians, unfortunately, are the ones in control of our culture. They set the pace as to what our political culture should look like. And we find them going backwards and causing retrogression instead of progress every day. And this is what I think we must always speak against. And I agree with the professor that civil society organizations should not stop at monitoring election. But they should also be seen and heard when politicians are up doing the wrong thing. Doing the wrong thing.
Isa also take this question. It's similar. So, what should be done then? Most times, the 2/3 majority provision are not met. I mean, you find where a minimal number of legislatures gather outside the enclave of the assembly, and carry out impeachment processes. Again, the concept of gross misconduct is also misconstrued or misinterpreted. So what do you think should be done to be able to address and get those empowered to invoke this process do the right thing?
Thank you very much for the question. First, I would like to address an issue that Yabagi, the IPAC chairman, raised about the judiciary. You see, in a democracy, there are separation of powers and separation of functions. Because when you say separation of powers, it's separation of authority and function to act, the power to act. The judiciary has its own civic culture. It has its legal culture. So you cannot ascribe to the judiciary autocracy. Democratic tenets are not part of the values of the judiciary. The judiciary is hierarchical in order and in nature. So you do not ascribe all the tenets of democracy to the judiciary. And so there are practices that are judicial in nature. There are practices that are legislative in nature. And this is where the issue of impeachment comes in. There are practices that are executive in nature. So for instance, how do you describe gross misconduct from an executive perspective, from a legislative perspective, from a judicial perspective? There are rules guiding all of this. There are procedures guiding all of this in all the spheres of our democracy. So things are not done in vacuum. Things are not done in space. And this is which brings me back to this issue of political culture and democratic culture. In other words, as executive, what are we doing to get legitimacy in the eyes of people? Because when we are voted as executive, we are empowered by the vote and given authority when we are sworn into office to act. So how do we use this power to get legitimacy? And from legitimacy, you get influence. And this is what follows. So the same thing happened in the legislature, the same thing happened in the judiciary. All of these sectors have their legislative practices that leads to culture. So coming back to the issue of misconduct in the executive fold, we have financial codes, we have financial regulations, we have procurement laws, we have procurement guidelines, we have planning laws, we have planning guidelines and rules. Anywhere these rules and guidelines and ethical codes are not followed to its logical conclusion, then it is leading to abuse. For instance, you cannot spend a kobo of government money outside the budget. That is a law, that's a practice, that is a... So once money are expended outside the budget, then there's a misconduct there. Now when the legislatures do things outside the purview of legislative practice, it's misconduct. So when legislatures conduct the act of the impeachment outside the rules of legislative practice and legislative culture, it's misconduct. But we have rules that deal with executive misconduct. We have no rules that deal with legislative misconduct. When legislators sit and impeach in the dark or leave the sanctity of the chamber of legislative procedure and come to Abuja to impeach a governor, as we've seen in the past in Nasarawa and the likes, and what happened in Anambra and many other states, then there should be some sanction for those legislatures. They should be barred from the legislative chamber for a number of years. This is what IPAC and Yabagi's group should pursue. We have political parties whose legitimate practice is to mobilize Nigerians towards an agenda, to mobilize people to vote. But our political parties wait for INEC to tell people how to vote. It is the role of political parties to come up with agenda, educate Nigerians, educate the people about their agenda. Do we have political agenda? Do we have a future in Nigeria? So a lot of our problem is not constitution, it's the civic culture, the mentality and the attitude of our political elites who are leading our Nigerians, because they lack the ethos, the values, the culture that every democracy is supposed to have. The Germans have gone through this, the Weimar period. They've gone through this period. The Italians have gone through it. The Spanish have gone through it. And the French have gone through it in the Republic. In fact, it led to the beheading of the king and the queen in 1789. And I fear what will follow if politicians keep training Nigerians towards violence, not towards peaceful resolution of issues. Because some of the hallmarks of politics, some of the denominators of politics is competition and struggle for power. But in Rivers, what you are seeing is not just competition and struggle for power, but competition and struggle for power and the resources that the power controls and those who are in charge and control of the resources. Rivers State is one of the most richest states in Nigeria. So that is why you see this whirlwind of power contestation. It is for the ultimate control of these resources. And the same thing if you look in Kano. This powerful state, this is why are we not hearing any of this in Yobe, for example, or in Gombe, for example? Why are these not so common? Because these are poor, or Zamfara. These are poor states with minimal control of resources. And so our elite need to retrace their step. If they train Nigerians towards violence, then they will get worse than banditry. They will get worse than Boko Haram. They will get more worse scenarios than what is obtainable today. In fact, what is happening now are symptomatic of the failure of the system to cage and not unleash the liberty and the freedom of people. We should democratize every space. And so for the judiciary, for example, what are they doing that is caging the liberty of Nigerians? What are the practices, what are the judicial practices that are not guaranteeing the liberty of Nigerians? It should be sanctioned. There should be sanction. But I don't subscribe to the view that the judiciary is democratic or autocratic. There are judicial practices that lead to judicial culture, judicial civic culture, and which is part of the judiciary. And this is what the judiciary is known for. And so political parties, now to Yabagi, political parties should sit down, EPAC, sit down and define what is a Nigerian political party. Because we don't have political party in Nigeria. I keep saying this. We have political association of people who coalesce together, not of common interest.
Thank you so much, Professor Kabir Isa, for that, your passionate contribution there. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you later. But we'll take a break now. Good Morning Nigeria continues. The director said we should take a break.
Yes,
so
I
let's
know.
Take a break. The break now, please. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service. And just before we went on the short break, I was trying to, just to make a point in terms of clarification that it's not just Rivers that's experiencing the impeachment rascality in quotes now. We also have Demola, we also have states like Ondo exactly,
this issue between the governor
and his deputy
governor.
And remember, this is the second deputy to be so impeached. The first was also eased out somewhere, one way or the other. Edo too also is experiencing the same, and despite the fact that again impeachment is to provide checks and balances and clear separation of powers. We've seen most times those who invoke the impeachment process are usually categorized as loyalists to a particular higher godfather or loyalists to a particular chief executives and all that. Thereby, you begin to question, the reality of the checks and balances of the provision of that clause and separation of powers. So I just like to ask Mr. Yabagi here, of IPAC, how can we actually, make these lawmakers to be truly independent and, you know, adhere strictly to the rules of, you know, impeachment, rather than dancing to the tunes of some, you know, political godfathers, as the case may be?
Well, Claire, you must understand that we have a state capture in our system of governance. The democratic system we have, there's a state capture. And that is why you see that even the legislatures that you talk about, they are often than not produced by the executive. Because the executive has a perfect, unfortunately, state capture on the system, that you cannot become a principal officer in any of these, whether the National Assembly or the State Assembly, unless the executive feels that, you know, you can do his bidding. You know, so that's why when Mr. President was saying that we should have a change of mindset, yes, change of mindset, but there has to be something which we call disruptive, you know, actions that should be taken.
But how do we break that state capture?
Yeah,
there must be a way.
Nigerians must.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we the electors, you know, must stand up, you know, to the plate. I mean, step up to the plate, and hold power to account. We're here, we're witnesses to all these things I'm talking about. You know, when the National Assembly was being put together, the structure, I mean, the leadership was. We saw what happened. You know, I mean, they were going to the villa. They will go to the villa, and then it is then they will come back to the National Assembly, and then whoever was anointed by the villa, that's the person that becomes the Senate President and Speaker. It wasn't hidden. It was so open, as if it was normal. You know, and the same thing happens at the state levels too. So we have to now address the issue of Nigerians themselves. You know, why do we keep quiet? Why do we allow these things to happen? And at the end of the day, you now complain. You know, when you could see what was happening, you know it's not what, you know, we talk about separation of powers, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so if you preach rule of law, like Mr. President says that should be rule of law, I had listened to his inaugural speech, you know, the high point of his speech was rule of law. So but when they come to form the National Assembly, there was no rule of law. The separation of power was not observed. That's why we are where we are today at the state level, and you will find it also at the national level. That's why the work of the government, what we expect from the government, we can't get, it's not coming. It can't come because the person that should check the executive is also in the pocket of the executive. This is reality. We shouldn't run away from it.
But the party also should have a role, because the party also throws up the type and quality of people that stand for elections.
The party is also not insulated from this state capture I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, we are not. And the issue, you see, there are three things that must be there before you have democracy, you know, taking its roots in any system at all. We have addressed the issue of institutions, weak institutions. You also have to have peace, and you must have justice. And those who have the state capture, they have recognized this. So, like in Rivers, they visit them with violence, no peace. So, if there's no peace, how do we ever talk about democracy? You know. So this is it. They deny you justice.
Okay.
They say go to court. You go to court, you meet them there. The court does not deliver judgment. They deliver technicalities.
Okay.
So these are the things that Nigerians must begin to address, because like Mr. President, you know, he wants the system to work, definitely, because he wants to leave a legacy. You know. So he should be number one. He should now champion the move to change this scenario. Like you say, change our mindset. But we need action from him too.
Okay.
So Nigerians will now queue behind him, and then we change the scenario. We have, unfortunately, a situation that shouldn't be here, visited on our people. We have everything that this country deserves to be number one, to be a superpower. But leadership. That's why I was very happy, one of those that were happy, that when 2023 elections was coming, I said, whatever happens, we're going to have a Democrat at the helm of affairs. Whether it's Atiku, whether it is Peter Obi, whether it is Tinubu, whether it is me, because I contested too, we're going to have a Democrat at the helm of affairs. Not a civilian, you know, government anymore. It's going to be a democratic government. So that's why we look up to President Tinubu to lead the pack, lead the change. We need that change.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yabagi, for that, your thoughts there. And one major thing you talked about is the change of mindset, which I want Professor Ayede to speak to. Professor Ayede, are you still with us? Okay, yeah, okay, you can hear us from the studio. Yeah, he talked about the need for a change of mindset, and some people have also canvassed that there should be the introduction into the school curriculum of to introduce politics. That is the need to train and to change the mindset of the pupils, the students themselves, that when you go into politics is to serve, not to acquire wealth. That politics, service, actually leadership is about service. Leadership is about giving. Leadership is not taking. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's right on the point, but we must recognize that actions speak louder than voice, and our children will tell us that our actions are so loud that they can't hear what we are saying. We are in the university and we know that what the politicians are doing smear on our students. So we are battling with effort to tame the culture of politics within our campuses to measure up to the ideal rather than follow what the bad example that's being set by the larger polity. So the whole idea of teaching those values in school is not the problem, because we teach civic education, we teach social studies right from primary school to secondary school, even before they get to the university. So what is taught, if you look at those textbooks and what is taught in class, are the idea, the correct thing that students should learn. But when they see what politicians are doing outside, they want to practice that on campus. So what we appeal to the elite is they should have some kind of agreement about how they will conduct politics in Nigeria, because they can see the direct consequences of bad politics. And I'm happy that the president himself and then the 11 governors of the PDP are now weighing in on this particular situation. In other words, they have a sense of responsibility to the fact that what is going on is not acceptable and should not be allowed to continue. That's the kind of action that will lead to transformation of the political process and help the institution building that we are talking about. So that the judiciary itself can also have a change of heart in their own system, and let the leadership also work towards ensuring that substantive justice is not displaced by concentration of technicality. So I think action from the leadership is very vital. And it's just that in the case of Reza, they didn't intervene on time. They allow it to degenerate before they are now coming into the picture. If they had come earlier, before all of this explode into violence, then would have been better for it. So it's a good thing that they are coming together to look at what has happened and suing for peace. We think that they should go beyond that to have values of democratic practices, respect for rule of law as part of the regular ways, routine ways of conducting their affairs. That will go a long way, helping even our young ones who are in the school system.
Thank you, Professor Ayede. Mr. Mark Jacobs and Professor Kabir Issa, my question is to you. Is there any way that, the parties themselves are also complicit in all of this? And I'm asking, because of the quality and capacity of those, that they clear to contest elections. Now we have the Not Too Young to Run Act, which is, throwing up very vibrant and intellectual, Nigerian youths into the governance structure. Can we also begin to look at, how political parties, vet their candidates for elections into the House of Assembly?
That is the very crucial and the main challenge to our democracy, because the political parties are the engine room and the production line for all the politicians that are occupying office today. They come from political parties, and the quality of the political parties is showcased by the quality of people in those offices we are talking about. There's nobody that is in the House of Assembly in Rivers State that contested as an independent candidate. They all came from political parties. And the impunity we are talking about comes from how they emerged first as member persons to contest election. How did they win their primaries? Many of them didn't contest. They just bought their tickets. Many of them were produced by some godfather. Many of them did not win their primaries. And so they go into these offices with this sense of impunity already engraved in them from their political parties. And then you find people who go into office and then they don't respect the political party again. And in fact, this case of Rivers is a very germane test case, because if Nigerians will recall, the current governor became governor and was anyway respectful of his political party. Together with the former governor, they told the PDP to go to hell. In everything they did, his emergence, his allegiance, his loyalty was not to the political party that produced him. And they didn't hide it. And I'm not surprised that today the PDP is neither cold nor hot on the matter. Otherwise, it is the PDP that ought to call all the parties to a meeting to discuss and bring sanity in Rivers State. But the political party lost its glamour, lost its authority in the process of his emergence as governor. And he cannot go back to that political party, maybe, for protection. And that is the very thing that politicians must take care of. Stop being rascally because you are occupying office. Be subject to the rules and regulations of this politics we are talking about.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mark Jacob, for your contribution there. But we are pressed for time. Professor, can you say something for 60 seconds on that?
I think it's time for our politicians to recognize the fact that any form of impunity is a menace to the consolidation of democracy. And your idea, you do what you like, then you go to court, should be taken very seriously as something that distracts from progress in our polity and restrain from those kind of behavior.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ayede, for that contribution there. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria. Professor Kabil, are you still there with us? Maybe let's have your parting words.
My view is that we need to, from 1999, we've imbibed a culture in which the executive, the governor and the president are the leadership of a political party, which is not what was obtainable from 1979 to 1983. If you remember the MPN issue between Adisa Akinloye and the Shehu Shagari. So what we must have is that there must be a separation of power between the leadership of the political party and the executive in power. Because the person who is voted into power rode to power through the political party. And so the party should be supreme, not the individual elected. From 1999 under Obasanjo, we have made the person elected more powerful than the political party. I think this is wrong. Secondly, we need to look at our practices, legislative practices, and apply sanctions to it. And then look at executive practices and look at what are the sanctions that apply. With respect to the not too young bill to run, I have advised the youth, go and capture the local government and wait for the governors to come to seek.
Thank you very much, Professor Kabil Issa. I know that you have so much to talk about, but I believe that we'll have more time in future to talk on this issue. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria. And still in the studio, we have Mr. Yabagi Yusuf Sani, National Chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAD. Thank you so much for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Okay. I thought I'll have 1 minute to say something.
You want to say? Okay. 15 seconds.
Yeah, okay, 15 seconds. You see, the system we have, like Professor Kabir Issa has said, it's like a pyramid turned on its head. That's why things are not working. So, the duty that we have at IPAC is to ensure that we bring back the glamour of politics. That's why we are reminding Nigerians that we are 100 years old in practicing political, democracy when the first party was registered.
Thank you very much.
And we're also introducing, some measures that will make Nigerians to now respect and like to be, part and parcel of what we are doing.
We have to go now.
Yeah, I
understand. Of our time. Thank you so much
I
for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Join us for another edition tomorrow, as early as always. I am Ademola Adeoye.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. I'd like to appreciate all our guests. And of course, from the GMN crew, do have a pleasant day.